We are going to start with David Schapira, who is the Director of Governmental Affairs for the California School Employees Association. Welcome, Mr. Schapira.
Thank you, Chair Leyva. Great to see you all, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I don't envy the position that all of you are in as elected leaders in our state. In my dozen years of elected leadership, I never faced the sorts of challenges that you guys are up against right now. And so not envious of the position that you're in, but anxious and excited to be here to offer our perspective. And so just for those who may not know, want to just share with you about who we represent. The California School Employees Association represents instructional assistants, paraeducators, bus drivers, food service workers, custodians, maintenance workers, office staff, attendance clerks, many others within our school system, basically the folks who are not certificated. And our members, as many may know and some may not know, that many of our members have been working since the start of the crisis. Many of our members never went home in March when COVID hit our shores, and have been working throughout the crisis. In some cases, our food service folks have been preparing meals for kids on free and reduced lunch. Our transportation folks have been delivering meals. Our IT folks have been propping up distance learning. Our folks have been very active since the beginning of this crisis in many cases. And I want to be clear that our members and you know, our sister unions, I'm sure, will talk about this as well. But our members feel strongly, the same way that some of you on the committee have expressed, that in-person instruction is far superior to distance learning. And we would love to see our students back in schools. We think that's critically important to get them back in person, developmentally, social, emotionally. That it is that is the superior method of providing the sort of instruction that we need to provide. We also agree that health and safety has to be our top priority. That has to remain our #1 priority. LEAs need the resources to achieve these dual goals of providing that in-person instruction and ensuring the health and safety of students and staff on school campuses. Human resources are critical to achieving both of those goals. And unfortunately, due to inequities that exist in our layoff protection laws in this state, thousands of classified employees are no longer in their positions, have been laid off, are out of work. Many folks whose job it is to keep students safe. Many folks whose job it is to provide the one-to-one instructional supports that are necessary. Many of those folks in many parts of our state have been laid off. And so we are concerned about the human capital necessary to meet the needs of our students. And when you talk about in-person instruction, Ms. Holmes mentioned, you know, we're not starting from scratch. And that's true. In some places, districts are ahead of the game. But in some places, districts are far behind. In certain places where they have laid off every paraeducator in an entire county, the needs that our students are going to have when they return to in-person instruction to get the one-to-one support that they have been lacking the entire time they've been gone in distance learning in places like that, the infrastructure is not in place. The needs, the human capital needs, are not being met. And I will say, you know, I represent classified school employees. I started my career as a high school teacher, and I have a master's in education and studied childhood development. And I just want to make sure that everyone's aware, and I know that the education experts on this call are well aware, that when students have learning deficits, when students are behind, when we have achievement gaps, which we like to refer to more accurately as opportunity gaps in our school system, there is really one solution that works to address that problem. And that is individualized support. And it is our members, it is paraeducators primarily, who, when the certificated instructor does not have the time or resources to provide that individualized support because they've got a class full of students, it is paraeducators who provide that support. And it's just critical that that be a component of this plan. Now, we appreciate that the governor's trailer bill for the $4.6 billion mentions that one of the appropriate uses, one of, I believe, 9 uses of those funds is to increase the human capital to provide that one-to-one instructional support that our students will be in desperate need of. And that's appreciated that that's mentioned, but it's just one of 9 options. There is no requirement that districts who have been without these paraeducators in some cases for months, there's no requirement that they bring them back now to provide support to students in distance learning, and there's no requirement that they bring them back when we bring students back for in-person instruction. That has got to be part of this conversation, because we have a problem now that in more than a century of education in this state and centuries of education in this country, we have a problem we've never had before, and that is the range that educators are going to face in terms of the students who are ahead to those who are the furthest behind is greater than it's ever been because of the situation we've faced over the last 10 months. And it's going to take that in-person instructional support and one-to-one support to get us back, to get our students to where they need to be. Now, obviously, health and safety, again, is our top priority in making sure that we can get to that point. And many of us in this meeting have been involved in conversations about school reopening since June of 2020. Some even back to April and May when we knew that this was going to be extended. Many of us were involved in a task force that met to develop a framework and a checklist to make sure that schools were ready to reopen for in-person instruction back in August and September. That was the goal, was to start the school year with folks in person. And we created some criteria. We created a checklist that we felt, given the conditions on the ground in schools across the state, could be implemented to make schools places that were safe for students and staff. And unfortunately, the state of affairs in terms of the spread of the virus was much worse than we expected it would be in August and September, and most schools did not reopen, at least universally, for in-person instruction. The situation today is so much worse in nearly every county in this state than it was in August and September, that it seems sort of out of touch with the reality on the ground to be having a conversation about rushing to reopen and getting folks to submit plans by 10 days from now, when the reality on the ground is so much worse than it was last August and September. So we have to be cognizant. Ms. Holmes mentioned earlier, there are only 6 counties in the state that are even eligible at this point to reopen at the 25 case rate, 25 new cases per 100,000. And so it's not that we don't think it's important and appropriate for us to be having the conversation right now about health and safety, and having a conversation right now about targeted interventions for students experiencing learning loss, and having a conversation about getting kids back for in-person instruction. All of those things are appropriate conversations to be having right now. But we have to also recognize the expectation that we're setting out in the state. And when the governor's plan came out, I will say many parents, friends of mine, neighbors, many of our members across the state. I got an email just this morning from one of our member leaders and from one of our staff members saying, hey, we're hurrying. We're trying to get our plan done by February 1st in compliance with this new program. The perception out there is that this program has already been passed, that the work of the legislature has already been done. It's already been negotiated and signed into law by the governor, and that there's new money that's going to be available to schools across the state who are going to reopen as soon as 10 days from now. So we have to recognize that this expectation setting is also important, and that we need our staff, our members, our students, our parents, our educators across the state to understand the reality that we are near the peak of the spread of the virus in California, and that we are engaged in making plans to ensure that our schools can reopen safely and that our students can get back for in-person instruction. But that's just not where we are right now as a state. It's not where we are with the spread of this virus. We are at a much worse point than we were in August and September. We share the concern of some of our colleagues in management who have raised this issue of the use of Prop 98 funds. We should be clear. Prop 98 funds are meant to be spent for instructional purposes. And the way that the governor's program is structured would essentially take dollars that schools should all be receiving anyway, would hold those dollars back and say that those who are able to rush and create this plan and execute it and negotiate it, bargain it with their exclusive reps and submit it within the next 10 days, even though this bill is not even passed the legislature or been signed by the governor, that those folks will get that money distribution. They'll maybe get a little bit more than they would have gotten otherwise. And the folks who are being more realistic and deliberative and ensuring that this plan makes sense and are not going to rush to submit it by February 1st will get less money than they will get if this program isn't passed. Senator Glazer, I think, pointed out well that there are some schools that aren't even eligible. Those schools, if this program becomes law, will actually get less money than they would get if this program doesn't become law, because it's out of Prop 98 dollars, and we're just rearranging deck chairs. And so Prop 98 is not the appropriate revenue source for this, or not the appropriate funding source for this program. If we're going to talk about this, let's talk about the use of dollars beyond Prop 98 or federal dollars. And, like Mr. Barrera said, the fact is that given the costs of testing, these funds will be spent mostly on that line item of testing. So just adding to the point of the fact that this money that is meant for instructional purposes should remain and continue to be spent for that purpose. Let's allocate dollars. Let's not take away from the needs of our students in terms of instruction to meet the needs of our students and our staff in terms of health and safety. Let's meet the needs of our students and staff in terms of health and safety, but not using instructional dollars. I think lots of folks have mentioned that the timing is unrealistic. As I said about Senator Cortese, I think, highlighted well how the expectation setting is sort of out of whack with the reality on the ground. This checklist just came out last Thursday, which means LEAs have only known what they needed to include in their COVID safety plans for 1 week. And we now expect them to take that information they got a week ago to develop a COVID safety plan, to bargain the effects of that plan with their employees, to have that ratified by those employee units, to submit that plan to the state, all of that within the next 10 days. It's unrealistic, and there's just no point in rushing to create these plans all of a sudden when this bill is not even yet law. To answer the chairwoman's question earlier, to have it answered by Jessica Holmes, and to hear that response about really us not even knowing at this stage which districts are open for in-person instruction, which districts have COVID safety plans, which of those districts have those plans ratified. I think those answers to the chair's questions demonstrate that this plan is not ready for prime time. Now, I want to be clear, I appreciate, and our members appreciate, the increased transparency that comes from the Safe Schools for All plan, the broader plan, not just this in-person instruction grant program. We appreciate the definitional clarity that CDPH has put in this consolidated guidance, which again is separate and distinct from this grant program. We appreciate this revelation or realization that young kids are actually better at wearing masks than we thought they were. In fact, in many cases are better at doing it than adults are, because the way their brains work, this learned behavior, habit forming is much easier for them than it is for adults. We appreciate the recognition of the needs to make sure that the PPE is available to the staff, that testing is critically important, including surveillance testing. But we're disappointed that the word vaccine does not even appear in the trailer bill language. So it's one thing to say that we're not recognizing the importance of vaccines or highlighting it significantly. The word vaccine or vaccination does not even appear in the trailer bill. And I think that's important. And I want to highlight, for those who didn't notice, the management folks and labor folks in this meeting seems to be are largely in agreement that vaccines have to be part of this discussion. And so I really appreciate our colleagues in management who have recognized the importance of bringing that into the conversation. We also have to recognize and I think we all know this, our state is behind in vaccinations. We are behind in distributions of the vaccine. I have many colleagues who I served with when I was an educator in Arizona. The vast majority of my education friends, teachers, classified employees, administrators, have already scheduled the appointment for their second dose of the vaccine. So we have to get vaccine distribution rolling. That's got to be a big topic of conversation. And we would like to see that conversation be part of the conversation about reopening for in-person instruction. Conclusion, let's construct a common sense plan that brings kids back for in-person instruction as soon as it's safe. Let's make sure we have the human capital to meet the health and safety and instructional needs. Let's do it right, not in a rush, not because of political pressure, but because our students need us to get it right for their health and safety and for the health and safety of our members and our communities.